For anyone who hasn't noticed, Super Fight season has made a triumphant return. But this fight, it stands alone. Two of the greatest boxers alive facing off in their primes. Who wins? Not even Vegas can predict. All this screams vintage, classic. And to make it happen, Spence and Crawford sealed the deal with a phone call. How delightfully old school.
First time we talked probably like 30 minutes, 35 minutes.
And I just let them know, like, hey, what's up? Let's fight. I've been calling these guys out since 2018.
Hey, look, who do you want next?
Well, you already know who I want.
I feel like I'm the guy that really made it happen. I want to fight Terrance Crawford. I don't want to fight anybody else.
On Saturday, July 29th, two undefeated champions will zone in on legacy.
This era is the Terrance Crawford era.
Definitely not, man. You ain't fought nobody, man.
What did I do to Sean Porter that you couldn't do?
He call himself the big fish, right? But what you do when the fish get took out the water, you suffocate him.
We gonna roll him up and smoke him.
When Errol Spence and Terrance Crawford scrap for an undisputed welterweight crown, they'll have each other, dance partners in lockstep, each offering to summon magic, artistry, brilliance, unlike ever before. That's the old school part, the enticing part. Boxing at its most compelling, risk-embracing, rock'em sock'em best. The truth hurts!
When I win this fight, there'll be no argument who's the best fighter in the world.
Oh, I feel as if I was made for this moment.
It doesn't get any bigger than this.
Boxing doesn't come much better. For this clash, have the history books ready. Because if those best selves can recall past eras, then old school will, in a way, be refreshingly new.
We know what's at stake. May the best man win.
The biggest fight of the year is finally here as Terrance Crawford steps into the ring against Errol Spence to unify the welterweight division. All four belts will be on the line tonight at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. Terrance Crawford puts his one title on the line. Errol Spence brings his three belts to the party. And in my opinion, not only will this unify the welterweight division and crown the welterweight king, but it will also crown the pound-for-pound king in boxing at the moment.
Errol Spence Jr. is one of the best boxers on planet Earth. And down goes Cal Brook. Errol Spence with some sweet combinations.
He is the winner by technical knockout.
He's got the three belts. What's next?
And now the unified welterweight champion of the world.
Everybody know who I want next. I want Terrance Crawford next.
I do believe this is the perfect time. You got two great fighters in their prime for all the marbles. It's going to be an exciting fight. I just can't wait for it to happen.
That's the fight we all want to see.
There's been a back and forth a lot with you and Bud Crawford.
I don't know your number. Save it. I want all the smoke. But right now, I'm looking at Terrance Crawford.
This is for undisputed. This is a big moment for not only myself, but for Errol Spence Jr.
Saturday, July 29th, they're going to crown the first four-belt undisputed champion in 147-pound history.
The wait is over. Watch me fry this fish.
Yeah, I know what time it is, baby. Terrance, I come up for that motherfucking belt.
Before we bring in my colleague and boxing expert, Jeff Cohen, a man who has been inside those ropes. He's currently retired, but he's unretired many, many times before. So you just never know with Jeff. He has joined me on multiple editions of the Fight Show over the years and has made you guys a ton of money. So he's going to be joining me. But before we do that, I am going to break down the odds for this fight and give my very quick overview as to how it's going to play out. And before I do that, let me let you know that I have a new Twitter account where you can follow me. It's no longer at LockBetting.com. It's at LockBettingX. Getting ready for Elon Musk's big change. So at LockBettingX is the Twitter account. This has been coming for a while due to COVID and some of the opinions I had. The old regime had me shadow banned, which meant that I couldn't host any spaces and I couldn't set up a subscription service to actually make any money from my Twitter. Also, people weren't seeing my tweets unless they came to my page or they saw me via one of the hashtags that I used. So that's no good for me, especially when I'm paying for Twitter Blue. I want to be seen. I want to be able to grow my account. I want to be able to grow my business. And that was basically a dead Twitter account. The account is currently suspended. Obviously, with the 7 or 30-day suspensions, you do get your account back. But there's also a DMCA takedown notice that I have to agree to. But it's just a dead account. I'm not going to bother with it. I'm going to start over. Shouldn't be a problem getting my followers back. I'm going to give out some free plays on the account as well. So do me a favor and head over to that account and give it a follow. It's at LockBettingX. Also, the football season is about to start and we are slowly releasing those futures plays. Futures hit at over 80% all time at over 1 unit or 1 unit and over. So if you want to invest your money wisely, there is nothing better than you can do than investing in the futures over at Lock Betting. And this is futures season. We're going to have futures for the EPL, for La Liga, for Serie A, for the Bundesliga, for other European leagues as well. Just released a Turkish football future. And of course, the NFL season, for the NFL season as well. We just had a monstrous NFL season with our futures. So if you want to get involved and make that money, head over to lockbetting.com and go for the appropriate package. I encourage you 100% to do your research first. Every single spreadsheet is posted up on the lockbetting.com website. These are spreadsheets that account for the 121 months in a row of transparent track profit. This service has been undefeated every single month for over a decade. And this is especially the best time to sign up, as I said, because we are releasing those futures plays that have over an 80% win rate for plays at 1 unit or over. So let's move on to breaking down this fight. Let's start by looking at the odds. Terrance Crawford is now the favourite. There has been money going down on Crawford this week. Initially, the lines opened up at 10 to 11, 10 to 11. Crawford was a slight favourite in some places, but he was only as wide as minus 120. He's now available at 7 to 10, which is around about minus 130, minus 140 in some places. I would stay away from taking him at minus 150 if that's all your book has. There are better prices available if you shop around with Errol Spence now available at 11 to 8. The draw is very short here. Usually the draw is at around about 20 to 25 to 1 here. It's only at 12 to 1 here for this fight. Errol Spence is at 6 to 1 to get it done by TKO with Terrance Crawford at 5 to 2. The decision for Errol Spence is at 5 to 2 with Terrance Crawford at 2 to 1 to get his hand raised via decision. We're not going to go through the over-under markets for this fight because the fight to go to decision is simply at 4 to 6 minus 150 for yes and 6 to 5 plus 120 for no. For the group round markets, Errol Spence is at 16 to 1 to winning rounds 1 to 6 and at 8 to 1 to winning rounds 7 to 12. Terrance Crawford is at 10 to 1 to find a finish in rounds 1 to 6 or 5 to 1 to find a finish in rounds 7 to 12. I personally see this fight going the distance. I find it very, very difficult to see either one of these two men stopping each other. And that's not because they can't. They are awesome finishers. They've finished so many of their opponents previously, especially Terrance Crawford. He's one of the best finishers in the game. But it's just difficult for me to see either one of these guys facing any kind of jeopardy. They come into this one with both of their O's intact, which is why it's such a huge fight. However, they have comfortably managed to protect their O's. They've navigated their way through this situation easily. Nobody can tell me that either of these guys have even come close to losing in any of their previous fights. They come into this one with a combined record of 67-0 with 52 knockouts, and they're boxing here for not only welterweight supremacy, but in my opinion, some would argue for Inoue, especially after his recent performance, but in my opinion, we will crown the pound-for-pound king. Spence comes into this one. He's 33 years of age as we approach the fight tomorrow. Crawford is 35. Spence has a 1-inch height advantage, while Crawford has a 2-inch reach advantage, and both fight in the southpaw stance. That in itself is going to be something difficult for the other to navigate, because whilst they do both fight southpaw, it's very rare that they'll see a southpaw on the other side of the ring. So that's going to take some time to navigate. Terrance Crawford is someone who likes to take his time anyway. He's a scanner, much like Lomachenko. Terrance Crawford can sometimes let the first couple of rounds slide by whilst he takes a look at things. So that could give Errol Spence an early advantage, and it could leave you open to an in-play. If you do like Terrance Crawford, but you don't want to jump on at the -140, -130, you may be looking at an in-play selection here for this one, as I do think Errol Spence will win the first couple of rounds. But overall, I think when you look at the southpaw situation, when you look at the invincibility that two have shown so far, when you look at the caginess that you may get at in the first half of this fight, with nobody wanting to lose their O and the difficulties that it took to get this fight done, I just don't see either man stopping the other. So it may be a very conservative play, but my main selection for this fight would be leaning towards the fight going the distance, especially when you're looking at that rematch clause that the two guys have got in place. As for picking a winner, it's very, very difficult, but I obviously have to pick one. You guys are obviously listening to this show to get some skin down on this fight. So by the smallest of small and tiny minuscule margins, I lean Terrance Crawford to win this fight. This is simply through looking at all of the different factors. I don't see any kind of edge when you're looking at their records. I don't see any kind of edge in terms of the age. 33 and 35 is not that different, really, when you look at the amount of activity or inactivity in both of their cases. For me, it just comes down to the unfortunate car crash that Errol Spence had. Now, he has recovered from that car crash and he has looked great. He's looked far better than anybody else would probably look coming off the back of a serious car crash that almost killed him. But he doesn't quite look like the same Errol Spence as before. The trajectory has changed. And the trajectory for Errol Spence, for me, was to go on and be one of the, if not the greatest of all time, to be in that conversation with Floyd Mayweather. And he can still do that. The winner of this fight will be able to claim that. But there's a difference between being Floyd Mayweather, being in that GOAT conversation, and being a retired, undefeated fighter such as Andre Ward, Joe Calzaghe, or Rocky Marciano. And without having that marketability behind them, without being able to sell those big fights, I don't think either of these two guys are going to be in that conversation, despite one of them being able to lay claim to being the pound-for-pound king after tonight. So I lean Terrance Crawford to be that guy. He's not a guy who cares about selling his fights. He's not a guy who wants to be that superstar. He just wants to be the best boxer. He's dedicated his life to that. He's obsessed. He lives, sleeps, eats and breathes boxing. And that's not to say that Errol Spence doesn't, but I'm trying to find a very, very small margin here, a very small advantage to make a pick. And as I said, my advantage goes to Terrance Crawford, just because I feel something has to be taken away from Errol Spence from that car accident. The trajectory has changed. I don't think he's on path to be among the GOATs now as a result of that. He hasn't quite looked the same. He has been able to beat his opponents so far since the incident, but none of his opponents have been this machine that steps into the ring with him today, or tonight rather, and that is Terrance Crawford. So that is my very, very small lean, gun to the head lean here on who ends up winning this fight tonight.
It's time for one of the most anticipated fights of this decade, Spence versus Crawford. And the winner is boxing's pound for pound best fighter in the world.
To make not just a fight, but a night, the perfect fight. Two undefeated champions summoned a virtue not often associated with their craft. To approach perfection, they needed patience.
Like that. I'm gonna have to take that.
In 2017, Errol Spence Jr. and Terrance Crawford were surging, rising, cementing. Crawford at super lightweight became the first undisputed champion in 12 years. He moved up to welterweight where Spence had just snagged his first belt. And all of boxing began wishing on the alignment of two stars.
What's next?
Everybody know who I want next.
You already know who I want.
But 6 years is a fistic eternity.
We've been licking our chops from day one, because this is a fight that we always wanted.
Throughout them, both champions proved that in order to pursue perfection, they had just enough patience to arrive in exactly the right place.
Ring Magazine champ 2 times.
At precisely the right time.
Terrance Crawford is the only fight that I want. We're going to make each other great.
And now with Saturday, July 29th, not close, but here. Forget what patience culled, because what matters is more transformative.
You're going to see a new, undisputed welterweight champion from Omaha, Nebraska.
Because now, the prize is immortality.
I couldn't think of a better scenario than this.
And the title of Best Fighter Alive.
Errol Spence Jr. is one of the best boxers on planet Earth. And down goes Crawford. Errol Spence with some sweet combinations.
He is the winner by technical knockout.
You've got the 3 belts. What's next?
And now the unified welterweight champion of the world.
Everybody know who I want next. I want Terrance Crawford next.
I do believe this is the perfect time. You got two great fighters in their prime for all the marbles. It's going to be an exciting fight. I just can't wait for it to happen.
That's the fight we all want to see.
There's been a back and forth a lot with you and Bud Crawford.
I don't know your number. Save it.
I want all the smoke, but right now I'm looking at Terrance Crawford.
This is for undisputed. This is a big moment for not only myself, but for Errol Spence Jr.
Saturday, July 29th, they're going to crown the first 4-belt undisputed champion in 147-pound history.
Wait is over. Watch me fry this fish.
See, I know what time it is, baby. Terrance, I'm coming for that motherfucking belt.
At this point in the show, I am going to bring in our resident boxing expert. We were lucky to get him. We could not make our times match up enough to do a full show, but we are lucky to grab these 10 minutes. And I really push for this because of the size and the magnitude of the fight. So thank you for coming on, Mr. Jeff Cohen.
No, I'm very pleased to come on, mate. It's always a pleasure.
You couldn't miss this one after all the fights you've done, and then not to be on for Spence Crawford. Am I hyping it up too much to say it's not the biggest, but the most significant fight of this century so far, or at least a decade so far?
Well, I'll put it into context. This is the fight that never happened between Pacquiao and Mayweather. This is that level, I'm telling you. Undisputed welterweight, 2 undefeated, absolute superstars. They put it out there both in their prime, and that's what I love. Do you know what? Some people don't do that. Some fighters don't do that. These two have come out in their prime, and they are fighting each other. So, mate, I'll make you right.
But what do you think about? I say fact. We don't know if it's a fact yet, but the projections at least, that this won't come in and do the numbers of a massive heavyweight contest of probably lesser people. For example, I don't think the overall legacies of a Joshua and a Fury but a Joshua Fury will hold up to this one. But that fight will do a bigger number. This fight may do something along the lines of a Logan Paul fight, something along that region. Do you think that hurts the fight? If it doesn't pull in millions and millions of people where people could...
I mean, that's the thing about boxing that really grates for me. You've got I remember Andre Ward, pound for pound, one of the best, but he didn't sell tickets, and this is the problem. You've got people that are that good, and I think Crawford as well. He's not a promoter's dream, and these are the 2 best in the division, undisputed, 2 of the best pound for pound right now in the world. But I think you're right. one of them things with boxing, some of them are superstars, some of them are ticket sellers, some of them, the media love. As I say, my example of Andre Ward, one of the best ever, but he wasn't one of those, superstars that sold out, and the media never bought into him. When he's interviewed, he's very kind of, bland and that, and they almost put as much onto media coverage as they do on ability of boxing, and it's crazy because this is, as I said, this is the fight that never happened between Mayweather and Pacquiao. These boys are putting it on the line in their prime, and massive respect to the pair of them.
Maybe he should have done Rocky in his prime, and then carried on boxing for a few more steps. That would have helped him out. But the thing is with that. That's what people may turn around and say. They may not know who one of these guys are or both. But if you're talking about a promoter's dream here, do you see that in any one of the guys when you're trying to analyse the outcome? And let's say that it is very close. I've seen predictions for both fighters. I've seen certain people go as far as to predict majority decisions. Now, we know that's a bold claim to say that the judges are going to see it as a split decision. That's a big claim. But I've seen that out there. I've seen a lot of division. The odds are close. Do you see an A side to this? Do you see anything where a promoter can have an influence on it and they may lean towards a certain fighter? Errol Spence is the A side, I guess, because it's Spence versus Crawford. But do you see anything in him where he's a promoter's dream?
Well, obviously, Spence, holds a majority of the belts, 3 to Crawford's 1. But Crawford is probably going to go in as the bookie's favourite. And it's funny, really. Because Crawford's obviously come up through the weights and Spence is more of a natural welterweight. But I guess it's similar to, if Fury boxed, Usyk's the majority belt holder, Fury would probably go in his favourite, and Fury would demand that he is the A side, even though he holds 1 belt and Usyk holds the 3. So it's similar to that, I think. It's a shame, really, that boxing even has is we should be looking at the ability of the fighters, how good they are, and the quality matchup. Forget A sides, B sides, forget promoter's dream. That's what it should be. But unfortunately, boxing's not. Boxing it's about the money and it's about the ticket sales, and there's so much. Even at the level I boxed in and the licensed, politics are so rife. If there's a ticket seller, they get preference, and it's crazy. It's all about money, and that's what the promoters are there for, all about the money.
Well, for me, I'm enjoying this because I think of it a different way. I look at this as a fight for us, for me, you, and for real boxing fans. I haven't seen a flood of casual, moronic opinions about it. You will get some. There are some, obviously, casual boxing fans, but I'm talking about the people who will tell you that AJ's the next Ali or that Conor McGregor's the best fighter in UFC. You get casual fans in every sport. I feel like this is our treat tomorrow, where we can quietly watch it, and those 700,000 to 1 million people who buy this fight tomorrow will be the real boxing fans, and the vast majority of them will know what they're talking about and do have the right to an opinion on boxing. And they are people that I will listen to and enjoy almost communicating with about this fight. That's what I like about it, because I don't think your people who are drawn in by your McGregor's in the world of MMA, or your Logan Pauls, or the YouTube boxers, or Anthony Joshua, or whatever marketing is behind. It's not these two guys. This is the purest fight that's happening tomorrow, and I believe that there isn't a whole load of money to be made from it. I think the two fighters are probably getting a load of the money that's going to be made in order to even do this. But I feel that we are being rewarded tomorrow for sticking by it.
Yeah, no, we're definitely the winners in this, and I guess that's the only real sort of one positive. When you have these fighters that are as good as these guys are, world class, top of the tree, pound for pound best, but they're not those huge superstar names. the casuals, as you said, they don't know too much about them, so that they're probably not even going to buy the fight. So it allows us to talk on social media, to talk between us, and not have to have the usual lot that when Joshua fights and McGregor fights and whoever else fights, the followers on kind of a jump on board. So that's the one benefit to it, and I really like it. I think it's a fantastic fight, and I'm really, really pleased that the two guys. Do you know what? It's lovely to see that. Too many fighters are worried about their losing their O because Mayweather never lost and whatnot. But it's boxing's the most unforgiving sport out there, and too many people try and protect their O. And these two guys, have put it on the line, and it's not going to affect whoever loses, however they lose. It's not going to affect it because they're two mega superstars. So massive kudos to them for doing that.
Well, rematch clauses are already in place. There's a possibility that nobody loses their O, which would be a massively controversial outcome if it happens. But as I said, the opinion is divided on this. It would not be amazing to me, amazingly surprising if somehow we do get a majority draw or something of that nature. But how do you see it playing out? I talked about this before you came on. I think the margins are so slim that I'm looking for the smallest advantage possible, and I don't get that from the records. As I'm looking at the records, British fans really should know both fighters. They really should be engaged and impressed by both. Both fighters ran through Kell Brook, who was obviously a huge name over here. I think that would be enough for should be enough for casual boxing fans to have an investment in this. But I get nothing from the records. The only distinct advantage that I give one side of it is that I don't know if Errol Spence was the same Errol Spence after crashing the car and almost dying. I feel that we still had an unbelievable version of Spence, who's still one of the best pound-for-pound boxers in the world. But I think the trajectory of Spence and what he looked like, the version of Spence that took Kell Brook to pieces and what he looked like he was going to be, which was no doubt the pound-for-pound king, I believe he did lose something from that, and therefore I do give it to slight edge to Bud Crawford just because of that, and just completely obsessed with boxing, and this is all he wants to be, and he's not bothered about the personality side of things, and he's never gone down that route. He's never gone down a celebrity route. I just see a very, very obsessed boxing machine in Terrance Crawford.
Yeah, I mean, you were exactly right. This is so close. There, we have a lot of fights recently where you can't call it, but it ends up that there's a sort of one winner that you could have looked at and thought, you know what, if I looked more closely, but this is so tight. I mean, for me, I've been a big fan of Errol Spence from back in day one, so I'm quite biased in that I've been telling people about him for the last 7 odd years. So for me now, I support Errol Spence Jr. I want him to win it, but it is so close. Looking at the records, I mean, as I say, they've both been inactive. I mean, Crawford's had 3 fights since 2020, and Spence has only had the 2. Now, obviously, Spence has had other pressing issues, but they've been inactive. I don't think that's affected Crawford at all. But you make a good point in Spence. He came back and he was very impressive. But obviously the car crash, not just physically, would have took a lot out of him mentally, and that will be playing on his mind, I would imagine. When he walks into the ring, whether he is thinking it or not, subconsciously that will probably be that Crawford's he's a finisher and a real good finisher, and if he gets the sniff of an opportunity, then Spence, he knows that. I mean, looking at the people they've boxed as well, they've you look at Spence and he's got probably the better resume. He's beaten Danny Garcia, he's beaten Mikey Garcia, Lamont Peterson, Chris Algieri. There's some good fighters that he's beaten. And he's beaten them pretty well. I think he's got 22 knockouts in his 28 fights. So he's a good finisher. Very good amateur background, Spence. He knows how to fight. He fights on the back foot, a brilliant jab, and that is what, if he does win this fight, that is what win him it. Errol Spence's jab is second to none. And if he gets in close, obviously you've seen the power of his body shots. You know, they're punishing. So I really like Spence. You know, I'm a little bit biased. And I want him to win. It's going to be so close, though. And if you look at Crawford, obviously he's a switch hitter. They're both southpaws, you know, but he can switch, Crawford. He's defensively very, very good on, you know, counter punching and putting pressure on. And again, as I said, he's a proven finisher. So you know, if Crawford gets a sniff of an end, he's very, very good at that. I can't, you know, I want Spence to win. I can't. This is one where I'm kind of like, I can't pick a winner. But saying that, I've looked at it and it's actually pushed me towards my two bets. You know, I'm kind of getting pushed towards it by default because it's very, very difficult to pick a winner. So with regards to my bets, you know, they're kind of by default I've chosen those, and I think they're winners. You know, so yeah, we can go on to that. What have you looked at for your bets, Bill?
It's very difficult to pick anything out without finding anything too chalky. Even with that, though, it's hard because I think the fight will go the distance just because in 100%. My mind, we've seen both of these guys be so dominant that there hasn't been... It's very Mayweather-esque. Not since Mayweather has there been two fighters that have come through and maintained their own at this point with such ease. There was no doubt... with Floyd. Some people say that one of the De La Hoya fights was very close, but really for me there was no doubt that he was undefeated when he was undefeated, and with these guys as well, they've come through so easily, so it's hard for me to see them in any jeopardy, let alone one of them actually being stopped. So the 4-6 minus 150 does seem like a good way to pick up £67 profits tomorrow by just taking this fight to go the distance. But at the same time, you are then betting against two very lethal finishers, especially when you're looking at Terrance Crawford, who once he gets a sniff, he gets you out of there. But getting that sniff against Errol Spence and creating that opportunity and putting him in any kind of danger is going to be a lot more difficult than it's been with other opponents. So even that feels like a gamble. I'd love it at better odds. I'd love it at something closer to a 50-50 where I could get the fight to go to distance at 10-11. But unfortunately, I will have to lay some juice on that. And I also have to lay some juice on Crawford to win the fight. And again, you can't take that with any kind of confidence at all. I just feel that what I've seen from Crawford is that he does allow rounds to kind of go by at the start, and once he figures you out, he's able to dominate, and that's very much what he does. There hasn't been anybody he's been in there with where he didn't sort of scan what they had and what they brought to the table and then was able to work them out. And it's just difficult for me to see Crawford not working out Spence and being able to do enough to win those final rounds or win the final half of the fight and even cause Spence some trouble. So just because I see Terrance Crawford winning a lot of those final rounds and catching the eye, I lean towards him to win the fight just because he's just one of the, especially in the current day, just the best fighter out there by a mile in terms of looking at your opponent. And it's very much, and previously, it's crazy how quick boxing moves because 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking at Lomachenko and he was also a computer. He also had that computer brain where he would lose a couple of rounds and he would look at you and then he would just completely take over. And Crawford does that, except he's an even more lethal finisher where Lomachenko would play with you and comfortably win 8-9 rounds in a row and let it go to the cards. Crawford actually gets you out of there. So it's just so difficult to pick against him. But I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I mean, as I say, with these two, I think they're both the type of fighters that at any point in the fight, however it's gone, they can change it in an instance. I.e., if Crawford has lost the first 6 rounds and it gets to whatever and he carries on and he draws a couple and it goes to like round 10, he can finish it. So he does. Neither of them have to worry about being behind on the cards because I think they can finish it. With these two, I think in the mind of both of them, they both know that either one can get that money shot at any point. So they're going to be very, very conservative, with their styles, and not going to go gung-ho, because if they do, Crawford knows that Spence can land, and Spence knows Crawford will. So for me, I think this fight, as you said, nobody gets knocked out, because they're not. I don't think they're going to go for it, and I don't think they're going to get in the position.
Is that cautious approach and protection of the and I'm not getting knocked out tonight? Is that going to be bad for boxing with all this hype behind it, and then we get boxing's big fight, and whereas people will say, it shouldn't be about the YouTubers and it shouldn't be about Joshua and Tyson Fury, but when this is and this ends up being a very cagey technical bout where both guys are quite conservative, is that a bad advertisement? Is that what out there?
This is where the real fans understand it. The sweet science. It's not going to, if it is a cagey fight, and it is one of those ones where it's not a barnstormer. The reason is not because the fighters can't do that. It's because the fighters are that good, and they know that each one of them could end it at any moment. So as I said, they can't go in gung ho. They can't do that, because it's not about keeping the O. It's about them wanting to win the fight, and they're both so good that I think that they're going to be cautious, because, as I said, both of them know at any moment a shot could land. And when those two great fighters are in there together, they know that can happen, and they're not going to go in and keep the guard down like they would against, say, an Amir Khan or whatever. They know they can land and finish it, and not a lot is coming back. So for me, I think we know that if this fight is almost a stalemate, it's because there's two brilliant fighters, like a chess match. Not because they want it to roll out like that. It will roll out like that naturally if it does, because these guys are that good. And you need to then look at it and say, do you know what? It wasn't a bad fight. It was a boxing masterclass by the pair of them. I don't look at boxing and think, there's a knockout. It's a great fight. I love watching sweet science. I like watching, some boxing matches, don't end with big knockouts. Doesn't mean they're not as good as a brilliant masterclass. So for me, the casuals will say, this was rubbish, but the real fans are going to look at it and say, do you know what a fight. They look at the defence of Spence, look at the counter punching of Crawford, etc. But for me, I think this fight, it's fair to say it goes the distance. I think everyone will look at it and say it goes. No one's going to come on and say Spence knocks him out or Crawford knocks him out. So I think it does go the distance, right? If we all agree it goes the distance, or a majority of us agree it will go the distance, you can look at a bet that will guarantee winning you money either way. Because if you look at just a decision, just a win on points, you can get 9-5 for Crawford to win on points. So £100 on that pays back $280. If you back Errol Spence on points at 5-2, £100 on that pays back $350. So if either win on points, you've spent £200, and your income, your winnings are either going to be $280, which is an £80 profit, or $350, which is a $150 profit. And I think, unless it's a draw, which I don't think it will be, I don't think either's going to get knocked out. So it's going to go to decision. So I think that's like either way, you can back either fighter by decision and win money. And I think that is the way, that's the angle, because I agree with you, Bill. There's not a lot in this fight to go out and earn loads. But if you want to guarantee something, I think you've got to break it down. It will go the distance. I think that's a fair, if you look at it and you break it down, I think it will go the distance. If it goes the distance, there's going to be a winner by points. Either fighter by points, backed, you can still win money. That's my bet, because I don't know who's going to win. Do you know what? It's the first time I've ever come on the show and I said I don't know. I want Spence to win it. I think it's so close. In you and I's boxing career watching these, I think this is the closest fight ever.
Yeah, there have been fights where we've gone completely against the grain. We're one of the only people, the only podcast that took out Alexander Usyk when he was just supposed to be a very winnable matchup for Joshua en route to the Fury fight. So We have gone against the grain many times where that was seen as a one-sided fight. We went completely in the opposite direction. So when we're telling you it's close and the odds are correct, they're almost not close enough, because over this last couple of weeks, Crawford has emerged as a shorter favourite when the lines did open up at more 50-50. But that's obviously been caused by the money. And sometimes in certain sports, especially sports like horse racing, for example, when there is some type of inside knowledge, it is good to follow the money. And that can be the case in boxing and UFC. In fighting, sometimes news comes out from the camps. This guy's drained. This guy's had a horrible camp. This guy's got an injury. I don't think that's the case for a fight as big as this, but I don't think it makes sense to go against the money. I think Errol Spence moving in the wrong direction is a very risky move. Perhaps it's not. Perhaps you're a complete Spence believer and you are just loving it, and you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm getting Spence as a bigger underdog every single day. And that might be how you feel. And I would not blame you if you feel that way and you have followed Spence's career and you completely believe in him and you end up losing. I don't think you're an idiot any way that you go with this fight. But I agree with Jeff. I just think that these guys have been so good. It's very difficult to see either one of them getting knocked down or losing. They think it will be a tight and cagey technical fight. It's not going to be for everybody, but it will be for the purists. And short of a head clash or a stoppage because of a closed eye or something of that nature, I think this one will get to the scorecard. So I'm happy to go along with that.
Yeah, as I say, I think it is the only, I don't think with any confidence you can say either knocks out either fighter. So, if you fancy that, then, by all means back it. But for me, I'm a lot more confident just to say, and I looked at the, one of your favourite bets, just to go over 10.5 rounds is 4-6. So even if there's a late stoppage, 4-6, just over 10.5 rounds it's odds against, but you will win money if you want to.
I got the distance at 4-6. I got 4-7 on over 10.5 rounds. But okay. I'm happy to. Yeah, I mean, 10.5 rounds is 10 rounds and halfway through the 11th. So I'm happy to get the better odds and take that 4.5 minutes and risk that 4.5 minutes. We don't see many stoppages in round 12. It would be more so that last minute and a half of round 11 that I would be concerned about. But we'll have to see how it plays out to see if there's anything that we want to hedge on. But I think that for the first 6 or 7 rounds, I think we'll feel quite comfortable. I think both men will be relatively in good nick. And I also feel it will be really close at that point. I feel that Crawford's going to do his usual thing. Spencer is going to be winning the fight. Crawford's going to come back into it. And there's a very good chance that 6 or 7 rounds in, we could be really close to level. So I think the fight, it will really then become a 5-6 round fight where it's all on the line. So that's how close I think it's going to be. I think it's almost going to start at round 6, which is why I think the distance bet is even stronger.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that the distance bet's a very good bet, very short odds, but it's a good bet. Another very interesting point is obviously I think Spence, has got one of the best jabs in boxing, and he against anyone, even Crawford, could dominate, with his jab and nick rounds. And if he does that, then and he gets to round 6, round 7, and he's nicked quite a few, then Bud's going to have to come out and try and end it, which, as I said earlier, he's capable of. But the other thing you've got to look at is Bud is one of the best finishers. So if he gets a sniff, so it's one of those fights. It's intriguing. It's very intriguing.
And that's why I asked you at the top, like as we close out, we asked you about superstars and if there's a superstar here and is there an side here and is there a bigger TV company here or is there a bigger promoter here? Just because how will those close rounds be judged? If the rounds are even, who do they go to, like in terms of what's better for boxing, what's better for promotion, what's better for the rematch? I know what's best for the rematch is that somehow this goes to the scorecards, but both guys have knocked each other down and they both, come out with bloody faces. Like that would be the ideal situation if we have a really tight decision for somebody, but they've knocked the hell out of each other for 12 rounds. I don't think it's going to be that kind of fight, but I do believe that they'll probably, whatever the outcome, there'll be enough here to justify a rematch. But yeah, I think points is the safest way. I lean Crawford by the slimmest of margins. But yeah, I mean, just even as you're talking and making a point about the jab, I know about that. I think there's a possibility that can be negated by the reach, which favours Crawford, but it's only by an inch. So again, every point has a counterpoint. You can say that Crawford has a better, Spencer's a better jab, but you say Crawford had a longer reach, and then you argue straight away by saying, it's only an inch, it might not make a difference. So it's just all a case of point and counterpoint. And you just end up with nothing at the end of it. You end up with no distinct advantage for either one, and that's why we so wanted to get this fight made, and that's why we all want to see it tomorrow. Just the last thing I was going to ask you, before I let you give your plugs for your socials and whatnot. Anything you saw, if you have seen, on the scales, like anything that changed your mind there? I think some slightly out of character stuff by Crawford. Perhaps he's trying to sell the fight. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe he's never been nervous before. But just all of the N-word stuff, very out of character. That's my only observation.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, from a physical point, they both looked like quite almost drained, and I can see them both stepping up again another weight eventually. But yeah, I think any of those, the stuff like you mentioned, is just kind of mind games, and it's a little bit of nerves. And he probably never went into the weigh-in with that in his head to talk about like that. But strange things happen when you're nervous and you're under pressure. The cameras are on you. You're face to face, with the undefeated champion in front of you for both of them, and for me on the fight as well. As I say, I think the promoters and whatnot and boxing, they want a winner. Do you know what? They want an undisputed champion because there ain't many of them. So they want one. So I don't think there's going to be any there shouldn't be any sort of judges discrepancies or, look, we've had in boxing before. I think they want an undisputed champion because, let's be honest, whoever wins this, probably, at the moment, after Inue's win, literally the other day, he's probably pound for pound number one in the world at the moment. But I think whoever wins this will leapfrog it and become pound for pound the best fighter in the world. So there's a lot at stake, and it's it's ready to have an undisputed champion at welterweight, which is a brilliant weight, very competitive weight. So for me, I just think that it's, as I said at the very start, kudos to them both coming out and putting their records on the line and doing it in their prime. Because do you know what? We never saw Pacquiao and Mayweather in their prime for whatever happened reason. We never saw it, in the prime. And if we did, it might have been a different story. But it's one of those ones where when they're in the ring, on Saturday night, Sunday morning for us, you're gonna see it. And one of them, I think one of them's going to come out and really put a show on. And I really hope that's Spence, because he's one of my favourites, and I've been banging his drum for a long time before he became a champion. Before he even beat Kell Brook, I was talking. I think I tipped him maybe on your podcast or another one. I tipped him back then when he beat Brook, and people weren't so sure. I said, "This guy's the real deal. He's going to come in. He's going to beat Kell up," and he did.
We both tipped. So, we tipped him. We did a show. We both had the same lock, which was Spence inside the distance to stop Brook, and then we went and watched it at my dad's. If you remember.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. As I say, I've been a big fan of his, and there's a few of those fighters that I have. I spoke about Joseph Parker a long time before anyone knew. I spoke about Devin Haney, who's now one of the top ones. I spoke about Spence Jr. I like him, and there's a couple now that nobody knows that I really think are gonna go really far. But mate, I'm buzzing for this. This is a boxing purist for, as you said from the start. You won't have many of the casuals up at 5 a.m. in the UK watching this, because it's not a huge fight with fighters, when in reality it's probably one of, if not the biggest fight at the moment in boxing for the purists.
Give us your socials and we'll get you out of here to bed.
Cool. Yeah. Twitter, I'm at LeftHookQPR. So LeftHookQPR. And that's pretty much where I do everything on there. We talk about boxing, we do some tips and some betting and whatnot, and a lot of other stuff. But yeah, that's at LeftHookQPR.
Cool, Jeff. Thanks for coming on, and that's it for us, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the fight tomorrow. It's well worth buying. If you have been following boxing, it's well worth investing in this fight tomorrow. It is the biggest fight of the year. It is probably the biggest fight of the last decade. If you look at the accolades of the two fighters that we've run through on this show throughout, you'll know that it is an absolutely massive fight. One piece of advice I'll give everybody: if you have a bet on this fight, on any particular outcome, and you're using the scorecards on Twitter or the commentary or the betting lines, just completely ignore that. They were way off for Lomachenko and Haney. I had Haney via decision, and even I, who regularly writes off the commentary and Twitter, was concerned. They made it out like Lomachenko had won about 9 rounds of that fight, where I had it very close. But I was concerned. I wasn't sure if Haney had won the 7 or 8 rounds he needed, but I certainly didn't have Lomachenko by a wide margin. So don't let yourself be concerned or rattled by the commentators or Twitter or whatever. They'll see whatever they want to see. In fact, Twitter will just go along with what the commentators are telling them. So just be very careful of that, because they have been very wrong. And if you're seeing it a different way, and one guy is maybe an underdog because of the commentary and Twitter, then in this type of fight, it might be worth a sprinkle. If Terrance Crawford does use the scanning and stepping back and has a look at Spence and allows Spence to take those first 2 rounds, you may get significantly better odds on Crawford. It's a fight where the in-play market's going to be very interesting, and the opinions of how it's going by certain people online and by the commentators probably aren't that relevant. So just bear that in mind when you're watching tomorrow. But yeah, mostly enjoy the fight, and hopefully you'll win some money. That's it for me. Thanks again to Jeff for coming on. Good luck with all of your bets as always, and thanks for listening.